Hi everyone, and welcome to OfferZen's webinar, Navigating Today's Hiring Market, Strategies to Find the Right Fit. I'm Nick, I'm the Head of Engineering here at OfferZen, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Before we dive into the event, there's some rules of engagement. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please do post them in the questions tab there on the right-hand side. Today's webinar will be recorded and shared with you all. And then if you can use the chat tab to add any comments as we go throughout the system, throughout the session, sorry. Feel free to drop a comment in there. Tell everybody who you are, where you're from, so we can see if that's working. Things are a bit quiet today in the chat tab. There we go. Hello, Daniela, Linda. Okay, it looks like that's working well. Welcome again to everyone that's maybe just joined. I'm Nick, and I'll be hosting today's session. Just a few words about OfferZen. OfferZen is a developer talent marketplace that was founded in Cape Town, South Africa in 2016. We know the hiring market is hard and messy right now. Your inbox is flooded with candidates who aren't a great fit. At the same time, top candidates expect fast responses. So if you don't move quickly, they're gone. So, but we have a way to make it more zen. You can now post your jobs on OfferZen and only get direct applications from qualified, actively job-seeking tech professionals. If you have open jobs, simply hit the I'd like to know more on the poll on screen, and we'll send you a link to check out OfferZen yourself to create your own job. Okay, we've also got a full lineup of community events scheduled for the next few months, from webinars to new event types like our Tech Talk series, an AMA event style that features engineering leadership from top companies. If you'd like to join an upcoming event, please select from the poll on screen right now. Okay, in just a few moments, I'll be joined by Brian and Jade to chat about finding the right fit. So let's bring our speakers on stage. Please tell us who you are, your company, and what lens you'll be taking today's questions on. Brian, you're still muted.
Classic, muted me as I joined. Hi, Nick. How's it going?
Hey. Good.
So, yeah, my name is Brian van Vuren. I'm a dev manager, software development manager at Allen Gray. So the role is to work closely with the dev teams and our tech leads in terms of our technical delivery and our technical upgrades and architectural updates. And then, of course, that includes talent pipelining, finding talent in the market to fill vacancies and future roles and future leaders within the company. So we play the role of hiring manager for that at Allen Gray.
Cool. And I am Jade Fenter. I'm the CTO of Naked Financial Technology, also known as Naked to all the people that see our big green billboards everywhere. And yeah, I have an important role to play, even in the hiring pipeline, among strategy and other things. And I've been in fintech for a long time now. And yeah, I hope I have something interesting to share. I'm not sure I have all the answers for sure, but yeah, excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be covering 3 themes today. The first, the state of tech hiring. Second, finding the right fit, aligning business, technical, and hiring goals. And then lastly, cutting through the noise and standing out to top talent. And at the end, there will be some time to answer some of the questions. So again, for the audience, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post them in the questions tab. Alex, our superhero behind the scenes, will make sure that we get to them at the end. Okay, so let's dive in into our first theme, which is the state of tech hiring. I just want to touch on a few data points to share before we get going. So there's been a surge in developers entering the job market this year, and according to our 2025 Dev Nation, 40% of devs say they're looking to change their roles this year, and this is a 15% increase on the 2024 numbers, which seems like a big jump. And then developers are competing for fewer open tech roles. According to Indeed's data, open tech roles have decreased by 30% since 2020. And then hiring managers are flooded by inbound applications. And if we look at the Ashby hiring report, inbound applications have tripled per hire since 2021. And in Q3 of 2024, there were 350 inbound applications per successful hire. And then 95% of these applications don't lead to an interview. That's quite shocking. And then companies are spending more time screening talent in interviews. So we look at the Ashby data. Time spent interviewing candidates increased 40% between 2021 and 2024. And lastly, companies interviewing on average of 18.2 candidates and 30.2 interview hours per hire. So that's quite a bit to go through, but let's kick this off. Maybe Brian, you can take the first one. What major shifts have you seen in tech hiring over the past year? And what do they mean for businesses trying to hire right now?
So, I think over the last year, we've seen the job market change dramatically. I think at one stage, maybe it was just an overhang from COVID where there seemed to be lots of open jobs and lots of remote work, but that feels like it's dried up quite a lot in the job markets. And what I've seen for people applying to local companies, of which Alan Gray is one, is there's definitely a surge in junior talent. So lots of young people looking to enter tech or dev type jobs. I've also noticed that there's a lot of kind of generalist profiles. That is, it's no longer people specializing in one coding language or maybe even one framework or backend or front end, but generally they seem to have exposure across the stack and across many, many different languages. I'm not sure always the depth of that. And then with that, very detailed CVs. So often people with just a few years of experience have done many roles and have worked in many different technologies that might be coming from varsity or even earlier, now that people are getting more into computer science as a discipline. So there's a lot of talent, but a lot of talent that requires some development in the market that I'm noticing.
Jade, what have you seen?
What was quite interesting, and I think a lot of it actually is exactly what Brian has been saying. And what I've noticed, in particularly the way that we tend to hire, before, as a startup, you generally want people who are quite flexible. You want to be able to do many things as an individual that comes onto the table. And so we have always sort of looked at full stack developers, which has been perfect for us in the sense that you are getting a lot of people that are playing around across the entire stack, having experience across the stack. And the more that we've interviewed, we've seen, obviously, especially when you come from a more corporate space, these are traditionally very isolated and structured, right? You've got the specialists that sit the back and the front end, it used to be the Java developer. And now we're sort of sitting with, I think when we started, we were looking at hiring like COBOL developers just to save their lives. But, it's just that the fact is now we're sitting in a space where there is a lot, and there is a lot to get through and a lot to try and find amongst all of the profiles and CVs that come out. And that's required us to shift the way that we actually filter and bring people in. Before it used to be directly, just be an agile coach, kind of sitting, and she would directly interview the very first interview, using a lot more external agencies in order to do that function. And then you tend to get a lot of noise that comes through as that gets bigger and scales. And so now we've actually brought that in-house so that we can filter it closer to what we're actually looking for. So by the time I see someone, we're a lot more confident about the individual that we're interviewing. So yeah, that's sort of my comment on that.
Okay, maybe keeping it with you, Joe. What do you think is the biggest challenges that people are facing attracting and keeping the skilled talent?
So I think that, I mean, it's not that easy a question either, right? I think that we've never had a problem with retention. Let me put it like this. Why? I think that the hardest thing to get right when you're looking for a candidate, when you're trying to get someone through, is what kind of individual are you trying to bring on board? So, it depends on what you need. What I can say is this. Someone says to me, we need to hire 20 people, right? Now, am I going to chase to meet that target, or am I going to take my time and make sure I hire people that I think are going to have the biggest impact in the business? And the way that I look at that, and the way that I look at sort of who we're bringing on, I'd rather spend 100 interviews finding that one person who has that impact that I'm looking for, than just trying to meet a target and to bring people in. And so I think for me, I'm always looking for superstars, as I'm sure many people say, but I'm so hardcore about it that, I mean, I'm looking for people that are a little bit different. And when I say that, I mean, think about tech people generally, especially as you go sort of more junior as well. You think about people who are very technical, they're technical problem solvers. But what I'm looking for are product people that can solve technical problems, but think like product people, but communicate like them as well. And that's very difficult, right? It's a very traditional space. You're talking about, you've got your BAs, you've got your project design or product designers, you've got sort of a separation of thought. But as I'm thinking, if I want the most impact from an individual, how do I ensure that that individual is thinking like a product owner would think, is thinking about the actual thing they're trying to build and deliver on? Because I would rather have that one person who can think like that and communicate that way than have 20 people or 4 people, let's say, trying to do that role across multiple people. And I find that has a massive impact. But what that means is it shrinks the number of people that I'm looking for, at least in the startup space. And I don't see that changing in the way that we hire and the way that we look at people. So that's kind of at least from my experience and what I've looked for. And that's hard to find. That's really, really hard to find. So
Interested? Can I give my view there? I think it's obviously a different context to where Naked is at, and where Alan Gray is at. I think in terms of retaining talent, the difficult thing is now, I'd call it like the democratization of job searching. I think back in the day it was maybe like, I don't know, newspapers where vacancies were posted, but now you've got platforms like OfferZen, for example, where devs can build profiles and actively be sought out by companies, and we know LinkedIn is a big platform as well. So as much as we are hunting for talent in the market is hunting for our talent as well. So that becomes an interesting conundrum to deal with in terms of holding on to talent. And then finding talent is always complicated because it kind of depends on the runway that you have and how specific a skill you need. And that's what I was saying with like what I've termed, I guess, oversold CVs, is sometimes someone has dabbled with a programming language and then they've put it on their CV, and that might be something that you need immediately, to keep a system going or to build something on a short timeline. And then you have to figure out where are they actually at with something like that, and how quickly can they apply that skill. And that might not be that they have to be an expert in it immediately, but you need to figure out that runway. How long can you work with them? And maybe there's some hidden talent there that you need to uncover, but you have to try and make a judgment call, which is quite difficult to do based off of 1 or 2 conversations, because it's not really a great way. I mean, traditional interviewing isn't a great way actually to figure out how talented someone is or what prospects they have, but it's kind of the best tool we have at the moment.
Yeah, very true. We were actually having a chat the other day about is the interview process what it is today because of the starting of artifact, which is your CV. Essentially, that's meant to like sell you as a candidate. And if that wasn't the artifact that kicked off the process, how would the process actually look? But that's maybe a topic onto its own. So with more applications being out there than ever, do you think hiring has become easier or harder? Brian, we'll give it with you.
I think hiring has become harder. Getting people to apply for jobs is probably easier, just because there's a lot of I guess a lot of people looking for work out there, and people who are even in work might still just be open to having conversations, but actually getting to the hiring point is probably a bit harder. That could be for a number of reasons. It's getting to that point that I spoke about, where you have a good confidence that this person can actually fill the need. And at least in our case, we're looking to employ people who want to build a career with us. I mean, not necessarily be here for the rest of their working life, but similar to what Jade said, we don't want high turnover. We're not really looking to employ people for months. I think that's maybe what you would do if you wanted consultants for shorter term. But if you're looking for people to really grow with your business and develop, then you want people to stick around. And so you take those hiring decisions quite seriously, and getting through the noise and finding the real quality. I mean, it's probably the theme of this entire discussion, but one thing we found is it's no longer good enough to look at the CV and make a call. I mean, that can give you some pointers, and it is certainly here's a tip for everyone out there: put some effort into your CV, make sure it stands out. Don't obviously be honest on it, but that's your first, that's how you stand out firstly to a recruiting team or hiring manager. But that's not enough. And I know on like LinkedIn, you can do these easy apply things where you answer one or two screening questions, and then it's probably some robotic filter in the background. I mean, I don't think that does a great job. So for us, doubling down on the personal approach, and we have some really good people who are committed to doing exactly that, and picking up the phone and having conversations and getting to know these candidates to try and figure out whether they are a cultural fit first and foremost, and then also obviously a skills fit. That's a lot of the process before we worry about, let's put you through a technical interview or let's get you on site to solve a problem. We first want to know, are you the kind of person that would fit, that we believe would fit into our environment? And that doesn't happen with a 5-minute chat. That's a process, and you actually have to walk a journey with a prospective candidate to try and figure that out as best you can.
And I actually want to add on to that. So I think so as I mentioned, we had to change because basically we're just getting inundated with this fact that we're just spending so much time trying to find the right fit and the right person. And so then we sort of built this internal recruitment function where the key there is to find those quick, like, what are you looking for? And that's sort of what became difficult there is, in, as you say, you kind of get these CVs that just say, oh, I did everything under the sun. But when you actually meet them and talk to them, it's like, well, no, I just used it in this one place for this one thing ever. I don't know. It's the last time I touched it was actually 2 years ago. I don't remember. And I can't ask you anything about this to the candidate either. So I mean, so the way we stage this, and this has actually introduced a new problem for us at least, is that we want to be, okay, so we all want to be very sure about the candidate we bring in, because we all know firing people is horrible for everybody involved. It's not something we want. And I found one of the best ways to do that is in my session. I'll explain that in a sec. But the very first thing we do is obviously that quick, have a call with this person, talk to them, and quickly just get a sense of, do they fit? Do they sound right? Do they think in a way that we like? And it's just a very quick filter. But then that kind of comes into this first where our agile coach actually does the first actual interview. And that is more of a vibe check. It's about like, will you fit the culture? Will you meet with us on the way that we communicate? And that sort of is also an opportunity for us to sell ourselves just as much as, the candidate is looking for us. We need to make sure that we're absolutely clear about what does it look like at negative. That means what's the ugly, what's the good, what's the bad, because you want the person to be able to communicate back to you how they see themselves fitting in that environment, because it's about that success that they have in that role, which means you need to be very open. And, it's not just like, it's the rainbows and sunshines. And it's like, no, really, here are our challenges. Here are the things we're struggling with. What do you think you could do to help us in this? And that's just very helpful to see how people think about, like, oh shit, yeah, if I started there and did this thing, this is what I think I could do to help along this. Again, got to be cautious because people always give you the answer that you want to hear. So I think it's always best gathering evidence than sort of throwing hypotheticals at people. And that's kind of where it leads into this conversation with me. And I'm there partially also to make sure, do you challenge? Do you question? Do you, do you actually think through the problem? Don't just, if I say something, I want to hear your thoughts on this thing. I want your opinion. I want an opinion. And then we do sort of an algorithm session as well, where I'm actually trying to see, like, I'm not expecting you to get the answer here, but I am expecting you to deal with the problem and dive and really ask me some good questions. And then there's still another 3 parts of this process. And this is kind of where it gets, where you do sort of an in-person or sort of a live coding session, which nobody loves. And then another one, which is doing a take-home assessment, which everybody hates. We love it because it gives us certainty. The people don't love it because, like, why are you putting me through all of this? Doesn't my career speak for itself, kind of thing? And that's a bit of a challenge. Like, how do you get the right thing there? And I think for me, it's about how do we communicate really what are the opportunities we have, but also, like, I'm selling an idea. I'm not selling like a job. I'm selling something that I'm like, why do you actually want to be here and part of this team? And by keeping that at sort of the core of everything that we do, when we sort of get to the end and you do a bit of like a post check and a post, like, what did you think about this? It's not just a yes and no question. It's actually it's what resonated with you in your session that's going to make them be a success here at Naked. And then the challenge of this all being a 5, and actually the last session is actually to meet the co-founders, talk to the co-founders as well. Like, we're all involved all the way. But the problem that this introduces is if you're competing with someone who has, I guess, 2 meetings with the candidate, 2 interviews, sessions, and then that's it. We've got to get over the line very fast because we're going to lose someone who's actually really good. And so that's a bit of a challenge for us at the moment on thinking or rethinking. How do we approach this that still gives us confidence, but doesn't sacrifice, sort of that time that we're getting with the person? So I guess that's just,
Jade, I just want to, there's 2 important things you raised there that I think for anyone on this webinar that's in the hiring manager role or in the talent recruitment role. The one is the point you made about an interview is as much for us to figure out whether you will fit in our company as it is for you to figure out whether you will fit in our company. And I think you need to frame all interviews with exactly that mindset, particularly because so many people are interviewing out of curiosity. They are quite happy in their job, but maybe they would actually join another company. So that's got to be a departure point. You've got to both be making a decision there. Is a really important piece. And then the other piece you raised was also what you call, I guess, like a vibe check. And yes, there are a lot of people in the industry that are very sure of themselves and or maybe paint a picture that they can't actually sustain. But we must also be aware that there are candidates on the other side. They're those kind of hidden gems who aren't very sure of their skill set, who are maybe brought up in cultures or backgrounds that are maybe more, unsure of their skills, and they don't sell themselves in that way. And so part of the role of the interviewer and the interview process is to uncover those gems and make sure that they get the right kind of exposure as well, because some of our biggest talent didn't shine necessarily in interviews, but we had the right people and they could see that special something. And as this person, found their feet and developed their career, they've turned out to fly. And that's as important as filtering through the noise of the people who are very sure of themselves in that process.
Okay. With remote work, the reach of global talent becomes a thing. How are you guys adopting, and has any challenges arose? You can maybe go with Jade.
Okay. So we're based in Joburg actually, and a lot of the talent we originally hired was actually from there. And as soon as that sort of the remote work idea came mainstream, we actually started looking in Cape Town. It's very Silicon Valley this side. I'm actually in Stellies today, so it's actually and one of the things that we did is initially this was we were very scared of this idea, right? We thought like, oh no, what are people can actually do? And then it turned out to work very well. And we found a lot of I've got people in PE. I've got people in George. I've got people all over the place now. In SA, we're not looking at global for ourselves. But what we've realized is a challenge, unfortunately, with remote is, what we do to sort of deal with this, people do come up and fly to us through events, and we have what we call innovation and planning sprint. It's a time when we do sort of hackathons, but also like innovation experimentation, and then planning for the quarter. And we bring people in to have that personal interaction. But what we're finding is that having people close to you so that you can actually have those educational sessions, which is more about, because you can pair online, you can do all of those things. But what we're seeing is a bit of more of a hybrid being a lot more beneficial to candidates, especially juniors, because they need guidance, and it's always nice to know you've got a senior next to you, you've got someone who's with you, who can actually help you. You can turn around and say, man, I don't know what's going on here. Can you explain this to me? And just having that sort of, that, or even just transfer of thinking, it helps a lot more to have that in person than it does sort of purely remotely. And so we're feeling a little bit more in that space. And whilst we do still hire remote, we are even looking, like, if we have sort of Cape Town, we're looking at opening sort of like a Cape Town branch so the people in Cape Town can meet and work together a bit more. And so our shift, there's been that shift in thinking about how we might be looking at where to find people, where to put people, but also just that human interaction, especially because a lot of what we do is about humans. It's about, it's about even our product, the stuff we do. It's really about people. And how do you make sure that gets across? I mean, just as an example, I once did a project with Colombia and the Netherlands, and we had this remote sort of video conferencing thing, and we always checked in. Man, I thought these guys were the laziest buggers ever, and I was like, we're not getting stuff done. Like, what's going on? And then we went over and met them in person, and we found, like, actually they're just like us. They're fantastic. So there's just something different about being in person with people. And I'm not talking about extremes on either end of remote or, in office, but rather, like, how do we create an atmosphere that's more about people and more interconnected? Yeah.
I think for us, Alan Gray's been around for a while, and obviously pre-pandemic, remote work wasn't really a thing, but for very isolated cases. So it's been a journey of figuring that out. And we do have a primarily in-office based working arrangement now, just because that we find works well for us, and we find all the same reasons that Jade mentioned, really. And we do pride ourselves on having good quality people, and so we like to bring those good quality people together, because that's how we feel we solve problems best. That said, we've learned a lot from working remotely and the benefits of it. I do think that something that is taken for granted is how intentional you need to be when you do actually work remotely. There are companies that do it and do it exceptionally well, but it's not by chance. It's a constructed process that everyone is committed to, and that's what makes it work well. So it's not the same as just working from home but trying to do everything synchronously. I think that doesn't really work. So you've got to be quite intentional about that. In terms of what it means for talent, I don't think there are as many roles abroad perhaps as what there once were. I think that's dried up a bit with maybe the States and some of the other places, the EU not hiring quite as aggressively. So people are reconsidering that as a working option, and are perhaps more open to working in person again. But it is complicated, and it does in some ways feel archaic. I think you just need to know what you offer. It's impossible that every company fits every candidate, and that's why we do the hiring and interview processes. There are a variety of options out there for you as a candidate, and so it's important that you pick the one that best fits your needs and your lifestyle, and where you are in your career. And the same is true for us in terms of hiring talent. We want people who want to work in our arrangement, and then there's every kind of other arrangement. So I think it's just being honest about that, and maybe discussing it early on, rather than trying to, retrofit, this is our style and this is your style. Let's just have that conversation early on and make sure that we're aligned before we waste time, because to each his own. I don't think you need to try and force someone to do something they don't want to do.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to our second theme, defining the right fit, aligning business, technical, and hiring goals. Some data points. The majority of devs are applying to jobs that they're not that qualified for. And if we look at our OfferZen community poll, 69% of developers apply to jobs where they're not fully qualified, and then 50% do this because they believe they can grow in the role. I think that maybe touches on what Brian mentioned earlier about the CV overselling. And then companies might be using the same tools as before to test technical skills. If we look at the DevNation data for 2025, 43% of devs still get their skills tested with online coding challenges, and nearly 60% of devs get assessed with a technical call or an interview. So with that, to set some context, can you each briefly walk us through what your hiring process looks like today, what you think is working, and what's still a challenge? Brian, we'll kick it off with you.
Sure. So we have a dedicated hiring team or recruitment team for our IT function, which obviously is a bit of a luxury, and that's maybe a bit more possible given the scale of the business. But we have 4 or 5 very dedicated people who spend a lot of time in the market engaging with potential hires, doing those phone calls and building those relationships that I mentioned. And that precedes anyone even coming into what we would consider an interview stage. So they walk that journey and work closely with the hiring managers in weeding out the talent. And then when we do decide to interview someone, then we'll get on a call and do what we call telephonic screening. And that's bit of a personality check, as well as just checking some of the fundamentals. And I think Jade mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter as much as you get the right answer, but how do you answer? How do you unpack a problem? Do you really know what you're talking about? Because there's some stuff you really should know, even if not the deep computer science theory. And from there, we then will progress to a technical interview. At this stage, we haven't been doing technical assessments. We're still thinking about how that fits in and where that fits in our current context, but then we'll bring preferably on site someone for a technical interview, which will involve some whiteboarding, some problem solving. It's not everyone's favorite thing to code under pressure, but usually you can get to see how someone thinks in that conversation. And then that'll be engaging with technical interviewers as well as cultural interviewers, and we'll chat a bit about how you show up in a team and what your career goals are, and whether you would fit from a company perspective. And then we will check on our side, have follow-ups, and then potentially another conversation with another group of people, depending, and then make a call from there. That's the rough outline. It's not an overly prescriptive model, but that's the general way we do it.
Cool. I mean, I think I blabbed a bit earlier and gave it all away, but yeah. So as I said, we've sort of got that very early screening. It's a phone call. It's, obviously we've looked at the CV and whatnot. We thought, okay, we're interested. We move into an agile coach, or it depends. It depends if we're hiring a specialist or not. That's changed a little bit, because if you're doing a specialist role, I want you to speak to specialists as well. And so then we'll sort of pre-screen with some of the specialist questions to really just get a sense of, does this person actually have real experience in what we're looking for. But otherwise, the normal process, they kind of go through that, speak to our agile coach, and we go to get a good feeling of the culture. And is this really a person who we want to take that sort of next step with? I see them, and then we've got the devs. And so, I don't have a dedicated hiring team. I use my people. So our alignment, our understanding of, biases and also history and potential, and making sure, diversity and all of these things are considered as we bring people in. It's really on the roll, and these guys are actively building stuff, and they really understand, like, what are they trying to do in terms of, my general question to them is, would you want to work with this person? Would you be happy to deal with this person every single day? Like, that's it. Like, you've got it. If you don't, like, I don't want to hire someone's going to hate. Like, no, I don't want to. Yeah. So I don't care how good you are. Like, I really don't. You can be the best thing since sliced cheese. Like, if you're not going to fit the culture, I don't want you. I don't want you to create chaos. I want you to work in my chaos. So then we sort of got that. I get that sense. I do the algorithm. Then we do the session with the devs. They sit with them. So this is kind of like the third part of the process, third, fourth part of the process. They then do a live session. From that, we sort of see, where do their practices lie? What things can they identify by looking at existing code, and just trying to see, like, oh, okay, they know these things, and rather than asking theoretical questions. Out of that comes we then have a take home, and then we do a debrief. And then the last step, once we're fairly convinced, they'll meet the co-founders, have a good conversation around the business and understanding the business further. And it's important that, and out of that, and then there's sort of like just a debrief to make sure we're all on, what do you think really works for this candidate with us. Again, I think that one of the things actually that I didn't mention that I think is absolutely critical to any of these sorts of sessions that we do is that at the end of the session, whether they make it or not, we have to give the candidate feedback. And I think it's exceptionally, like, I've had some of the most amazing times when someone's actually emailed me and said, Jade, I really appreciate that you were openly honest with me. And I've had people that I then saw 2 years later for an interview that I saw them back, and they've said, you know what? I took your advice and I've actually changed my career. And so it's just like that they, even though they didn't make it through, they had a really good experience and they got something out of it. And I think that's just important in terms of how we do these things as well, because it can feel inhuman when you're just like pumping people through a process, and that's not the intention.
Sure.
Okay, Dave, let's maybe keep it with you. You've been speaking about what the right fit means for you, but maybe we can expand on that. And what if we bring in like AI and tech hiring challenges in general into it? How does this impact how you consider technical skills, the team dynamic, and the company culture?
So I mean, one thing that's sort of obviously we're an AI business, so that's like core to who we are. But what's exceptionally important is that we don't shy away from technology, and we don't shy away from all these different LLM tools and things that have come about. When we are going through the candidacy, we do certainly tell people they can't use it in some cases, right? We're like, listen, if I'm having a conversation, so what I'll say is like, if I'm having a conversation, I'm doing an algorithm system, I don't care about what the LLM can do. I care about what you can do. And I've had some really dodgy cases where the guy's eyes are swifting this way and that way, and he's clearly not here. He's ChatGPTing on the side. But you can also pick up when you start asking deep questions, then either you have them staring at you for a few seconds, and then you're like, okay, so they don't know what's going on actually. And so that's been one thing that's been interesting. But when it comes to things like the take-home assessment, I don't care if you use ChatGPT or Cursor or whatever tool set that you have that's using AI. I care deeply that you can solve a problem. And I care deeply that you understand how that was solved and how that was done. And so that's why the debrief with the candidate when we do that sort of part of the session is actually really important, because we do things a little bit differently, right? Which is the fact that I have actuaries and I've trained actuaries to become developers. And what's key about that is instead of having them sit their model and then decide, okay, guys, you devs need to build something, they actually own it themselves and they build it. That kind of changes the dynamic of the people that we have and the way in which you do things. And what you'll see is they can solve a problem, but they don't understand how it worked or why that worked. They just copy pasted and solve the problem. And that can lead to its own set of problems. So I do want people who can think about things and solve things, but we primarily promote significant use of AI tooling in our development lifecycle, in sort of what we do from idea to implementation. It's all throughout. It's core to what we do. And it's also how we sort of look at productivity. But what that means is that, again, you see people who have clearly used some Gen AI to make their CV. And then on that front, then you're sort of like, you have these very like, it's like telling me a lovely story. The moment you actually see them and start asking them questions, you realize like, no, like this is it's just fluff. There's no real meat here in what's actually available. And then the other thing that we do, I mean, the way that we've done things is I don't like use AI to screen. Like I don't think that's the right way to do things in my space, at least in my opinion. But I do find it very useful. And the fact that we actually do transcriptions of our sessions, we pull those together, and so we don't miss things. And we look at that and we say, okay, this is what we expected, this is what we checked for, and this is what actually happened during the session. And that's used both in terms of how we improve the process going forward, but also how, sort of how did the community, like how did what we were expecting and what we actually did, because sometimes these sessions, they're not scripted, right? It's a conversation with the person and trying to see, it's very natural. And so you don't want to really miss sort of those. I know it's like sort of that star, so someone else mentioned it there, but it's speaking to sort of getting the evidence out of the candidate. And I think that for me, it can be very helpful when you've sort of got these tools and I can sort of say, okay, look, yeah, I've got all this fluff. What are the key things? Yeah, okay, these. I actually only care about 2 of those points. Okay, I'm going to actually dig into this deeper and see how much they actually know. So I guess that's what it is for that. But it's always a concern, and I think on the like, if you look at juniors who over rely on Gen AI tools, there is a bit of a concern there where it feels like there's pushback against that as well, because people feel like I'm going to become dumb, and I'm relying so much on the tool that I'm not actually upping my skills and my thinking. But I think you have to adapt and you have to think, differently about the way in which you do things and the kind of problems you're really solving. And I think because I naturally sort of shift more into product thinkers than into tech problem solvers necessarily, that actually works in my favor. It's not going to work in most people, I think, but for me, it's quite helpful. Yeah.
Brian, on your side?
Yeah, I mean, Jade spoke a bit about actually using AI in the recruitment process, which is interesting. That's not something we've done too much, but I think for us, it's important that the person shows up, in a conversation. I think that's exactly what Jade was saying. And people often say, oh, but before the calculator, it was important that you could do maths in your head. Now it's not important because you can use a calculator. And that's true, but I think you should still be able to do basic addition and subtraction just as a life skill. And so we try and test really that. We don't want to know whether you can quote, the definition of big O notation or something, but what does that actually mean in applying a problem? And can you identify it in an early stage design thinking problem? Those kind of fundamentals. So that's really what we want to test when it comes to right fit. Culture is also super difficult to test. I mean, how do we know that you will fit in with us? And how do you know someone's going to be your friend? Is you need to spend time with them. So that is really the investment that you make when you do an interview, is you're spending time. And often it's some of your senior people, and Jade was saying co-founders giving up their time to actually meet people and say, are you a good fit for this team? And I think you need to make peace with that up front, that it's not a quick fix kind of slap on some talent kind of factory thing. You're looking for people to join your team, and so that is going to be time and costly. And once you make peace with that, you have the best possible chance of actually figuring out whether someone is the right fit.
Thanks. Let's move on to the third theme of the day, which is cutting through the noise and standing out to top talent. Again, just want to share some data points. All of this comes from our 2025 Dev Nation data. Start your search on platforms that candidates trust. So the two most trusted sources for devs to find the job are Tech Marketplace at 44% and peer referrals coming in at 21%. And then use your hiring process to build your employer brand. And that's 40% of devs turn down offers due to company culture. That's quite a big number. Speaking to current employees, 47%. And how you conduct the hiring process are the top two ways dev assess your culture. So a good candidate experience is built on salary transparency. I'll get it right eventually at 72%, which is pretty cool. And then let's kick it off with everyone on the market in some way. How do we think about standing out to passive talent or to re-engage people down the line? Brian, I'm going to go with you.
I think one of the things we've done is be more mindful about our job descriptions that we put out there. I think that it's short-sighted to just list a whole bunch of requirements and what we expect from you in the role that's overly generic. So we really invested a lot in rewriting those job descriptions, trying to give a day in the life view of what you could expect in this role. And then work closely with our recruitment team, who aren't technical people by trade, but they've really worked hard to learn what it means to function in a technical role, so they can have a real conversation with the candidate, not just paint the picture of working at Allen Gray and in the nicest way, but they can really speak about what it means to be in this particular role, and helps with engaging talent more directly and definitively. And then I said it earlier, it's a relationship that you build. And my worst thing is feeling like I have to keep people working here. I want people to want to work here. There's lots of jobs out there that people should go work at if they would like to. But if you feel like you fit here and you belong here, then that'll be great. And then you'll be satisfied in your career, and we can hopefully do great things together. And that's really about not trying to rush it. So our team builds relationships, and it might not materialize in the moment, but they will circle back and touch base. And they basically have friends throughout the network. And it might not be that you ever end up working for Allen Gray, but I think that investment in the developer community means that if not now, maybe later. Nick, Jade said earlier in terms of feedback, very often the feedback is not necessarily no, never. It's no, not now, and maybe later on in your career, it will suit. And so we're building that. We're building a talent pipeline to employ the talent in South Africa and make sure it doesn't all get shipped offshore. And so the best way to do it is with patience and with consideration that it's a marathon, not a sprint in terms of the hiring game.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much to add. I mean, I think we've also addressed some of these things before. I think that I mean, a lot of the cases where it is not someone who's right now in the market, but just actually reaching out and talking to people. I think relationships are really important. Referrals are really important, but it's more about, I guess it almost leads into the brand building side of things. But just for me, we've often just like said to someone, look, I know you're not looking. I'll just have a conversation. Let's go have lunch. Let's go chat. And then of course this is because we were very interested in an individual. It's not sort of everybody just like, I'm not having lunch all day every day. But the important thing here is just that it's like, how do I get the message right, or how do I track the right people, or people who aren't really looking? And as Brian said, I maybe now is not the time, but I want you to know I need talent, and I need you when you're ready. It's fine. I'm not going to rush it from my side, and you don't have to rush from my side. But I'm going to continue looking, because that never ends. Yeah, but I don't want to add too much to that. I think Brian hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, Jade. Last question before we get over to the audience questions. Any big learnings from letting a top candidate slip through your fingers?
So it is very funny that you mentioned that, because just last week, I actually, where was I? I was at the Google's GCP launch in Joburg, and so I'm off and about, and I'm also part of this process, of course. And I have a team who's super excited about an individual, and they're like, "Oh, this is the guy. We've got the person. Let's get them in." I'm like, "Well, I can't really just go around now, because I'm actually trying to talk to investors and stuff at the same time, so I just can't do this." That day, it comes to, and they're like, he sends a message saying, "Look, sorry, I've taken another offer." And it's that kind of missing the opportunities when they do arise, because it is difficult to find people. And I think in my case, I could have said like, okay, look, I'm stopping everything to do this. Unlikely, but I know that that person might come down again when that opportunity happens, because they got through parts of the process anyway. I actually shifted the process around so that I was not sort of second in line, I was a bit later. But the thing is, we're all competing in the market, right? We're all sort of, give me the best. Everyone wants their best. And I think part of that is okay. Part of that is fine if I don't get somebody, either because maybe I didn't land the message right. Maybe I didn't get the idea of the why we do what we do. Because if you aren't bought into my why, and you're going to go to someone else, I mean, okay, then clearly we're not a fit. Good, have a good time, and that's because, I mean, like I said, I'm not sitting here trying to meet a numbers game. I'm here because I need talented people who give, I'm just trying not to swear now, so just who care very deeply about what we're trying to do here, and how we're trying to get there, and how they could play a major part of that. So I think that's effectively what is the message. And I think, yeah, I'm not going to rush. I mean, I can even tell you on the flip side, I've done the opposite. Someone was in the market, they already got an offer, and they're now like ready, and they said, if we don't do this now, if we don't give it, they're just going to go and give up. And it's okay, let's shortcut it. Let's just not do half the process. I regretted that significantly. So I never skip the process anymore. It works well. There could be better ways we could do the process entirely. I completely think that's true. But I'm not going to chase it just to get that person in. Like, no, if it's not time, the time's not right, it is okay. We will find someone who can do it, who loves what we do, and can, and be a part of the team. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 recent lessons, I suppose.
I think I agree with that. I mean, I think you need to be sure of your process, and it won't work for everyone, and people will maybe try to rush you or want to skip it, and that's okay. Then maybe they're not the right fit for your company anyway. And the responsibility then in turn on us as hiring managers and hiring teams is to continually review that process. Is it still fit for purpose? Should we be doing things better? Can we be more effective? And and not be unapologetic about it. You know, that is what the company stands for. And if you can't even get through the interview process, what are the chances that you're a good cultural fit? So, and I appreciate that people are maybe under time pressure and have lots of competing opportunities, and that's okay, that they get to make those decisions, which is totally fine. They have the agency in the market right now. I think one other learning, I don't know that if it's from letting top talent slip through our fingers per se, but for hiring managers, it's dangerous, or it can be difficult if you've had a bad experience, and maybe if you've hired someone that wasn't the right fit, and it didn't really pan out, and you kind of had to sort out an issue down the line. You can maybe take some of that trauma into other interviews, and you can be hyper aware of, am I looking for the right things, and I missed this last time, could I have done better? So it's important to take each candidate on their own merits, and try and look at it with as much of a blank slate as possible, because like I mentioned earlier, talent looks very different in very different forms and doesn't always show up in the ways that you expect it. So if you try and take this like algorithmic approach where you've learned from all the interviews you've done, I think you will start to overlook some real gems, because nowadays, especially in the tech industry, people don't really just study computer science and then become developers. There's any and every route to getting into this industry, myself included. I didn't study computer science. So if you go with that mindset of each candidate brings different skills to the table and might show up differently, and I need to approach this with an open mind, and I think we've said numerous times, the people-centric approach, it mitigates against some of those traumas of, I don't want to make the same mistake I made previously, because I think if you do that, you're so on the lookout for red flags that you potentially overlook a good candidate because you're hyper aware. So it's maybe a bit of a lesson that I've learned in having done a couple of interviews in my time.
And I really love that, Brian. I just want to quickly to just leverage on the one thing you said there, which is people come from all over and from different backgrounds, and I mean even like studied backgrounds. And I think we had one lady, she studied to be a teacher. That's where she started. She then became an electrical engineer, and then she became developer. And so we hired her, but she's actually doing significant work for us in development space. Actually, she's now a product owner as well, but she's also driving education in the business, onboarding and all of that. So she brought talents and skills that we wouldn't just normally find in a developer that you would hire, right? And I think that's a really fantastic opportunity to find what else can people do. I mean, in fact, even in the ops space, like an ops is like help desk agent, people that call, we hire lawyers. We hire people who are just getting their degrees. And, you know, on that side, it's very different. I don't care so much about degrees. I care, like, you know, your experience and potential more than anything. But in their space, we have these people, and because we're a startup, there's so much area in which you can grow within the business, and we can find the space that's going to work best for you. And my general principle around things is, you know, if you move naked forward, we'll absolutely move you forward. And we're lucky that we're in a space where it's not so structured, where, sorry, the positions are all set and everything's done. We can create the space that we need to get what we need done at the end of the day. So I just thought that's, yeah, it's unique.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's move over to the audience questions. Feel free, either of you or both of you, to take them. Daniela asks, what keeps Brian and Jade up at night in relation to sourcing, placing, and retaining talent in their respective industries?
I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night necessarily, but I think just that what we started with how the market has changed, that if you think that you as a company are the only ones on the hunt for talent, then you're sorely mistaken. People are hunting for your talent as well. Everyone is kind of on the market in some way, shape or form, or perhaps at the right price or the right conditions. And so that's kind of a reminder for me that as much as you want to be compelling to people outside the business joining your company and you want to attract talent, you need to be as invested at retaining talent and making sure that those good people that are in your building or on your team want to stay on your team, and that you're giving them the right opportunities, because it's very easy to make things nice for those coming in, and even in terms of what you're willing to pay, if the market is saying a certain thing, you got to be equally mindful about those that have maybe shown loyalty or already are embedded in your company to keep them around if they are the right people. Because losing someone, we've all heard that statistic about how much it costs to lose and replace someone, rather than just retaining a high quality individual.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm not gonna add too much, but I also don't feel from the sourcing side it's really keeping up, in the sense other than we have a million things we want to do. We need lots of people. So, that's probably my capacity profit more than anything. But in terms of keeping people, I mean, out of the history, so we've actually been building software since, well, it's been 8 years now. And in that time, I've lost less than a handful of people in tech. And the reason I believe that that's the situation with us is because people are invested again in the ideas, in what we're actually trying to build, not just I'm looking for a job to build a thing. And so I think because of that, we've been lucky to find this. But I've lost people for other reasons, like we were their first job. They want to know what's out there. They just don't know. So they want to go and explore. And I'm like, cool, go for it. Go learn. If you want to come back, I'm here. Don't worry about it. Like, yeah. And so that for me is kind of my feeling about it. We've had what we call boomerangs, the people who go and then kind of come back and they're like, yeah, no, I made a mistake. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, got to learn one way. But yeah, that's sort of been my feeling with it. I'm not too stressed about these things.
Okay, next question from Masira. How do you choose the perfect candidate between someone who has a computer science degree versus someone who's only done, let's say, a tech bootcamp, but doesn't have the degree?
I mean, from our side, I think the whole industry is caring less and less about the qualification that you have. I mean, probably some of the best coders out there are still in high school. So it is important because I think there's a certain amount of character development that goes into getting your degree or getting through a boot camp. And there's many great courses that are offered now that aren't formal education institutions, but there's that development side of it. And I also think once you've done a bit of work and you have a bit of experience, what degree you have or your background matters less and less. But maybe this is speaking from a starting point. But that's not really a factor in the choice. That your CV, the way I see it is your CV is your ticket to the show, but once you get into the show, it's up to you to show up. And that's why we do these interview processes. So there are those requirement lists. I think we are intentional about not being overly prescriptive or restrictive of them to allow enough talent, but not overwhelming through the door. But then it's on how you show up. And we're not going to say because you have a computer science grad that you're automatically preferred over any other training.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned already, like I don't care so much about the degree. Having been through multiple degrees, I know the pain and suffering of getting through to the end, but it does teach you sort of those qualities and things that, sort of, I think the biggest thing there is just being able to push through something difficult and get through to the end of it. And that for me is a bigger thing to see, but not so much like, oh, you learned algorithms and structured this and da 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 da. Like, what I care about is a lot on the potential of the individual in order to have that impact that we're looking for. And that's why for me, like in a developer, I'm caring a lot more about how you communicate, because when you're doing a sprint review or you're presenting back and telling me what the hell did you guys build or deliver, you should be able to communicate that to anyone in our company. You should be able to communicate that to the co-founders, to me, to, like, I'm technical, so I guess I don't count, but you should be able to communicate your ideas clearly. And also you should be able to have those opinions of why or why not you care about that thing that you are doing right now, and challenging it, even when it's been said, like, say like, oh, we've got to build this thing. If you come to me and say like, this makes no sense, man, like, why are we doing this? I don't think the customer's going to like this. Let's talk about it. I'm happy to have that conversation. And for me, that's more meaningful than just finding someone who's got the checklist of, you got a degree. Okay, cool. And as Brian mentioned, there's so many ways to learn nowadays. You could have come from a teacher degree and now you're developing. You could come from a psychology degree, but you've got the aptitude to really think through problems and also dynamics of people, which is again key to what I need. And if you can do that, come on board.
Awesome. That's the end of the questions. We are kind of out of time, but 30 seconds from each of you. What final advice would you want to give the attendees on finding the right advice?
I think my advice would be that it's not a marathon. It's not a sprint, it is a bit of a marathon. And I think it's be sure of your process and stick to it. Don't be intimidated by the market. The market works in seasons. So maybe you aren't finding talent for 6 months, but then you might find a whole lot of talent. Those cycles happen, and you've got to be committed enough to know what you're doing and why you're doing it in order to see those tough periods through. And that might be that you have to scramble for a bit while you look for the right talent, but it will come with that consistency and that commitment to continually revising your process, putting the right things in place and sticking to it, and not being apologetic for the kind of talent that you're looking for in your company.
So I would just say, don't shop hungry, or you'll buy everything in the shop and may regret it afterwards. And then the other thing I would just say is don't overinvest in trying to perfect. And what I mean by that is hiring is imperfect, right? It's imperfect. Like it is what it is. Our job is to make it as least imperfect as we can make it. And I think you've just got to, and that touches on a lot of things that we've spoken about earlier, but I think that just for me is that we know sometimes people don't like, like the coding interviews, and they don't like these things, but there's a lot of value. And when you have someone who wants to invest the time in us to do that, I'm more than happy to get you in. So I think just like that's kind of my thing is find what works for you, but don't try and think you're just going to land up with this perfect, hiring process. And that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thank you. This is the end of our webinar. I think we've covered quite a bit, and hopefully the audience feels enabled to navigate today's hiring market and find the right fit for their roles. As mentioned earlier, the recording will be shared with you soon after, in case you missed some nuggets of wisdom. And then a special thanks to both of our speakers today, Brian and Jade, and thanks for everyone that joined today. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. Cheers.